All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this sunny days Madison and Mountain View Hangout. This morning, we have the pleasure of having Dave Knox with us. Dave Knox is a CMO of Rockfish, as well as the co-founder of one of our favorite accelerators, which was also named one of the top 20 U.S. accelerators in the past week. I believe that article, past 2 weeks, came out, so congratulations on that. We're super excited about a lot of the work that you guys are doing, some of the unbelievable startups, some startups that have changed my life, like Flightcar. I'm a huge Flightcar user, coming out of the Brandery. Just announced some of the fantastic fellowship programs that you offer startups to join your program, including the Procter & Gamble Fellowship. I know your deadline is tomorrow, I believe, for the 5th class, so very excited about that. So would love to kind of kick off the hangout by handing things over to you, Dave, and having you tell us a little bit about the Brandery, the vision, what makes you guys different from other accelerators out there, and what we can expect and what startups might be able to expect from what you guys have planned for 2015.
Yeah, for sure, and thank you once again for having me on today. It's really a pleasure. So the Brandery, we started back in 2010, and it was really inspired by the time I spent at Procter & Gamble, where we were doing all these interactions. I was one of our founding members of the corporate digital strategy team, and just realized there was a real disconnect between the brand worlds and the startup worlds. One, just recognizing the strength between the two, but also startups being able to leverage the principles of brand building that are used for CPG, but think about that for the startup world. So that's what we got started back in 2010, kind of focusing on. And fast forward, we have our 6th class coming up. We actually did move the deadline to applications back 2 weeks, so it's going to be April 16th now for that. And we're excited to have a new class of companies coming in to really think about how can we change the startup world for both what I call brand tech, marketing tech, but also consumer internet that would leverage the power of brand building.
Awesome. And so I noticed in reviewing your application, it wasn't until question 29 that you asked, how does your company make money? And I think that's really interesting, and it looked like you had a lot of other questions about the team and the experience and the vision. So can you talk a little bit about what draws you and the Brandery towards bringing in specific startups? What are you looking for in the team, and how important is the idea versus the team?
Yeah, so I think it's a mixture of the two. So personally, when I'm looking, I'm looking at the team first and foremost. And I say that because especially the earlier a startup is, the more likely they're changing, evolving, and going to be in a different place. For instance, in the brand world, one of our most successful companies is a company called Ahology. And Ahology, when they came into the company, into the program, they were a company called Marooney. It was actually 4 names ago. And they were a data play, they then became a fashion play, and now finally they're this amazing marketing technology tool for Pinterest and the visual web. But if we had only evaluated them on that initial business idea, we probably would have never had this company that's been named the fastest growing startup in Ohio for the past 2 years. Yeah. So I put a lot of focus on the team. And with that team, though, what I'm looking is, do they have a unique right to win in the space they're going after? Are they scratching an itch, something that just really annoys them that they're trying to solve? What kind of uniquely qualifies them to go after it? Flightcar is probably one of the best examples, because when they launched that business, they were 18 years old. It was going to be 7 years before they could even rent a car, and that annoyed them. They just didn't like the fact that it existed, and that's what they went to change.
Right.
So if you're scratching an itch, that really gets me interested in terms of what you're going after and where you're going.
Yeah, and I can hear it sounds definitely a bit like the P&G mantra of insights and the importance that Procter & Gamble puts on having consumer insights. So do you guys, through your program, do a lot of work around kind of research and consumer insights that maybe some other accelerators don't have, given your experience with P&G?
We do. So, we do a lot of our CPG thinking we bring into the program. Both when you look at our relationships with corporations, but also just the mentors. One place where we are different is we have great founders, we have great venture capitalists that are mentors, but we also have a lot of digital marketing leaders. We have guys like Pete Blackshaw, who's the global head of digital for Nestle, and Ashwin Nathan from Frito-Lay, and so forth and so on down the list. And these are all folks that were born and bred in the CPG world. And so we do a lot of those principles. What is your insight, as you call out? What's this driving factor? We actually put them through doing concept tests at one point. What is that singular idea? What's your reason to believe? Finding out what's going to be that messaging that really does spark. Because there's a lot of insights you can get from that and a lot of things that can benefit it. And then one of the final things we do that's pretty unique for our program is we have a really strong partnership with the agency community. So we actually have about 12 agencies in Cincinnati that all donate pro bono to the program.
Wow.
And this is great firms like LPK and Landor and Possible and Rockfish that donate to support and mentor one of the startups. And by nature, these are folks that live and breathe big brands. And so they bring a lot of those insights as well.
And so I noticed also that one of the commitments through the fellowship that's made by the brand marketers is to do some kind of pilot program to kind of test with these startups. And I know that, one thing Evolution continues to struggle with is kind of we spend a lot of our time bringing prototypes and proof of concepts to market in the form of brand startup partnerships. Is the pace at which these brands move, and fast for these brands is incredibly slow for the startups, and time equals death. I mean, we have ourselves seen one or two startups get pushed to the point of almost going out of business because they were trying to support a big brand pilot program that would mean so much to them in terms of proof of concept and case study and learnings, but to get there and to even work at the speed, to try to keep pace, which is a very slow pace, with the brand partners was really damaging to the startup. So do you find that you need to do a lot of training to your mentors and to the brands to help them move at the speed of startup? And how do you kind of protect the startup in a way from, some of the perils and the risks that come with working with big brands?
Yeah, so one of the things we do spend a lot of time is talking about the cultural differences and making sure kind of both sides of the table understand that and know how to think about it and approach it. But it's actually one of the structures that we did when you look at, take the newest fellowship with P&G. We've had a lot of P&G employees that have been mentors for a long time for the program. And by being a mentor where it's not tied to a business objective, it's a chance for them to actually see what that culture looks like. To start understanding, okay, this is how startups think, this is how they motivate, this is why they're calling me, every single day, if not every single week, not because they're trying to be high-pressure salesmen, but because they have a burn rate, and what does that mean, and
right.
How do they think about it? So it's actually the mentorship that we have is almost like a trial opportunity for a lot of these folks to have a chance to see inside this culture, to experience it firsthand. And then they can go and do a formal fellowship where they bring in the corporation side as well. So we find the mentorship is a really kind of enriching area in that because it gives you a chance to learn and see behind the curtain, if you will, in an environment that it's not just the startup selling to you. It really is the startup seeking advice and guidance from you as a mentor, not just a wallet, if you will.
Yep, that makes sense.
Do you guys feel that there's specific brands that you've worked with that respond better to integration with the startup world? Because it's something that I've seen a difference in the shorter period of time, obviously, than Gina or Liz that I've been in Evolution. Is that there's some brands that seem to be more forward thinking and more able to work with startups at their pace. Is that something that you guys see as well?
There's been a lot of discussion on that, and I've had one VC that I won't name the brands, but he said it's when they brag about having these two brands on them, I kind of ignore it because they'll work with anybody, so it's not really an accomplishment. So I actually don't think of it as being a forward-thinking brand. There's some people that just love the press and the PR of doing a lot of partnerships. So I think of it more as the marketers behind the brands. And you will find champions and great marketers that love that innovation and are willing to help drive it through, not because there's necessarily a corporate mandate or a corporate culture to do it, but because they'll roll up their sleeves, take the time to get that great partnership.
So it becomes a very individualized sort of personality-driven thing?
Very much so.
Yeah.
And that can change when that personality moves on as well. But
Yeah,
we spend a lot of time coaching our startups that it's finding those champions and finding the right people that can really drive that through, because that's where you find the most interest versus just going after the logo.
So something we were talking about before, it sort of went on air was, your location, right, in the Midwest, which is, obviously, less known as a startup hub, but as we were talking about, like, I think that there's more and more stuff to get sort of getting built out of that. Do you see any barriers to location in terms of bringing teams in and accessing like good pipeline? Because people look at it as like it's not in the ecosystem that they were envisioning. Is that a barrier for you?
It's not a barrier at all, and in fact, I think it gives a huge kind of competitive advantage across the board. Okay. So, I talk about the rise of brand tech, for instance. It's a post I actually just wrote recently. One, you've got Drive Capital, which was founded by Mark Kwame, who is a Sequoia venture capitalist, launched a $250 million fund in Ohio, launched up in Columbus. And in Forbes magazine, they asked him why he did that. Why was he betting his career? And this is a guy who he led the investment in LinkedIn, so he's pretty good at what he does. And he said, first off, I think about people talk about pedigree of computer science and how important that is. He said 25% of computer science majors in the U.S. are in the Midwest. When I look at the pedigree that I looked for in a CTO, it was Carnegie Mellon, it was Rose-Hulman, it was University of Michigan. The great CTOs are starting in the Midwest. They just sometimes move to other places. So job one is keep them. And you've got that advantage. He said job number two is look at the amount of GDP that's based in the Midwest from the Fortune 500. And especially if you're world of marketing technology, how many of those players are here? And I think James Gross from Percolate said it best. James has created one of the most amazing content marketing companies. And he was talking about when he was at Federated Media, he spent all his time going to Madison Avenue to the media agencies. And he spent his time in New York and Chicago at the media agencies. Ever since he moved over to Percolate, he spends his time in the halls of the brand marketers. And so as we see the shift from ad tech to brand tech, I think you're going to see actually locations in the Midwest, in Cincinnati, in Detroit, in Minneapolis, where the brand marketers themselves are. That's going to be the competitive advantage to work hand in hand with the marketers, not just with the media planners.
Well, and I definitely agree that like it's something that I've also seen is the value that a group like Evolution has, and it sounds like you guys have as well in terms of hands-on connection to brands. That seems to be one of the biggest advantages that like we have as an organization as well, is that we work so closely and do a lot of hand-holding with brands that those groups that sort of play around in the brand startup connection space that do more automated stuff. I think that they miss that point in the fact that you're right there with them. I think that you're right. That probably does give an interesting advantage too.
Dave, do you think we've only got about a minute left, but do you think we're in a bit of an incubator accelerator bubble with how many accelerators are being started or brands starting their own and just kind of everyone getting in the game? And I think, you guys stand away from the pack. Obviously, you have a very unique angle. I think all of the list of the top 20 are kind of moving the whole industry, but the more we kind of see and emails we get, hey, we're starting an accelerator, an incubator, all globally, does it feel like it might be a little bit of a bubble and everyone's just trying to get into the game, or do you think this is kind of rising tide floats all boats and there's room for all of these different programs?
Yeah, what I think is there is an evolution going on that people just need to understand what's the reason to do certain things and what a different program is going to be, because it used to be the word accelerator meant a single thing. It was two guys and a dog, and that was the phase of what an accelerator meant. What I think we're seeing is a splintering where I use the words that we have undergraduate and graduate level accelerators that have emerged. where you can't go straight and get your MBA if you haven't done the undergrad work at times. And I think you see a lot of accelerators that are good for that undergraduate level. First-time founders, it's only 1, 2, 3 employees, and they really need mentorship and help just to figure out the very fundamentals. And that's a great thing and a good thing, and every city should have programs like that. Every college should have them.
Yeah.
Because it's an evolution of what it means to teach entrepreneurship and mentorship and everything. Then I think you see an evolution of programs like ours, the Disney Accelerator, Techstars Mobility up in Detroit, where it's more graduate level, where it's not about accelerating your product, it's about accelerating your business. And those have a different responsibility. And if anything, it's actually the part I worry about a bubble is actually in those graduate level programs, that you still have a huge responsibility if you're doing that you're an advisor to a startup, you're helping them, you're guiding them. And I do think we see some companies get in the, I'm going to launch an accelerator that is a pure selfish reason for doing it,
right.
Where they're forgetting the essence of mentorship and helping the companies. That's the part I think we need to be careful of, that every corporation doesn't need an accelerator if they're only doing it to benefit themselves and not to benefit the ecosystem, and more importantly, the founders and themselves.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We could keep this conversation going for a long time, and I hope we do. And startups who are watching this, good news, the deadline has been extended to apply, including for those fellowships, so April 16th. So go check it out on the Brandery, and thank you, Dave, so much. We look forward to learning more about all of your different programs and continuing to partner.
And thank you for the opportunity. I hope to see all of you in Cincinnati soon.
We'll get some graders.
Great. Done and done.
Dave, do you have 2 minutes?
I do.
All right. Thank you so much, Dave.